Good morning, everyone. This is Leslie Wyatt with SoftPro, and welcome to episode 64 of Saved You a Seat. We are going to talk about navigating the latest FinCEN rules. I know that everyone's super excited that we have yet a new set of rules coming our way, but today I'm going to spend some time kind of going over on a higher level, not super granular. We are going to provide some information post this webinar in our follow-up email. I have some PDFs and some FAQs and some other stuff that I think will be super helpful. As usual, this is recorded and we will go ahead and send it out later this week, like I said, along with some additional educational information that you can use and share within your office. If you have any questions, we do have a question feature within the webinar. It should be somewhere on your toolbar, and we have Ellen Crummell with SoftPro on as well, that she'll be monitoring those questions, and she can interrupt me and ask me them as we go. And with that, I think we will go ahead and just get started. I will say one other last thing. I don't know that this will last a whole hour, but I'm happy to answer any questions, so you might get a little time back to yourselves as well. So with that, I think we will go ahead and get started. I apologize if my voice is a little scratchy. The allergies are kind of bananas here in Chicago right now. So, all right, so we are going to go ahead and dive in, and we're gonna just kind of get an update of where we are, what's coming, and what is expected of us at our end of the industry. So just real quick as a little background, we are looking at, a FinCEN update. So just in case everyone doesn't fully know and hasn't had a lot of interaction with FinCEN, FinCEN's anti-money laundering regulations for residential real estate transfers essentially is in place to increase transparency and accountability in real estate transactions by requiring specific reporting requirements for non-financed transfers to legal entities or trusts. So cash deals, seller financing, there's other types of transactions that fall into it that we'll talk about it. But essentially it was put in place to combat money laundering in the housing market, mostly foreign entities, shell companies, stuff like that. But we will get into all of that. But that's just kind of a quick background of what the goal is and why we're even dealing with it. It's been around for a while. It's just been in very what they call GTOs, like their geographic targeting orders. So it was just in a lot of very specific area. They had thresholds as far as dollar amounts that would qualify a transaction. And they've gone away from, they still have that, but now they're saying more of a sweeping, hey, if it meets any of these type of transactions anywhere in the country, we want to know about it. And that's what we're dealing with and what we're going to talk about next. So what is this real estate report? This is new. It is a new form that real estate professionals involved in certain real estate closings and settlements will need to file. Sorry, I don't know why my screen keeps popping more than once, but it's a new form that real estate and settlement agents are going to have to file with FinCEN for certain transfers of residential real estate that are high risk for illicit finance. Essentially, they meet the criteria. No financing certain entities. It is on residential property, not on commercial, and we will talk more about that. I would like to point out that the final version of this real estate report has yet to be released by FinCEN. We are working off of the rule, which also has not been finalized. They are very close. I know that for a fact. Alta member talked with them actually at the end of last week, and they said they're extremely close in getting ready to release it. Now, I don't know what their version of it really close is, whether it's a week, whether it's a month, I'm not really sure, but they are close. They had the original rule open for public comment through the end of January. I don't see that there'll be many changes from it, so everything we're kind of going off of is stuff that we know will stick. They might have something like a nuance here that changed and a nuance there, but overall, it should be basically what's there. But like I said, we don't have the final form, the real estate report yet, so that is forthcoming, and we were keeping our eye out to see if there was any changes to that. All right, I'm going to page down and we're going to see if it does it twice again. All right, so we have this coming. We know it's coming. We don't have the final rule. We don't have the final form, but what we do have is the effective date, which is December 1st, 2025. Currently, FinCEN is standing pretty hardcore with that date. That doesn't mean that it can't change. It just means in all of our conversations with them to date, they've made no indication that they're going to change with that date. The comment period, like I said, ended in mid-January, and it's over. They've taken all those comments, and that's what they're doing. They're finalizing that rule. It's very similar to any other rules and regs that come out in our industry. They get issued, they go through a comment period, they get reviewed, the comments get reviewed, they get fine-tuned, and then it gets released. So we're still waiting on the final rule with the specific details, but we don't really expect a tremendous amount of changes, but who knows? Okay, so what are we even talking about here? Like, what is covered? Is this every transaction? What do you need to know? Well, I can tell you that it is not every transaction by any means. So the type of transactions that are included fall under the residential real estate. They include existing residential 1 to 4 family properties, co-ops. Oh my God, I don't know why he keeps doing that. Co-ops, condominiums, and mixed use and apartment buildings. So your residential real estate, pretty much what normally falls under there. It also includes vacant land or a lot where a purchaser may intend to build a residential structure primarily for occupancy by 1 to 4 families. Also, as a side note, even if it is a lot and there is a portion of it that's commercial use, if part of it is also being used for residential 1 to 4, it would still fall under this. Part of what I'm going to send you post this webinar is a FAQ from FinCEN, and it clearly defines which type of property is included in these transactions and which ones would be exempt, if you will. If the exempt properties are pretty straightforward, so if you have any questions, you'll be able to use that as a reference. They should also make that extremely clear and clarify that in their final rule as well. Next, we're moving on. It says, okay, we got this new form and we know that a property qualifies. What do we do with that? Well, who submits this real estate report is probably the #1 question that I get. I have no idea what's happening. Everyone's just going to get a preview of the next slide for the entire time today. So essentially, everyone keeps asking me, okay, we got this form. When we get it, who reports it? Like, whose job is this? This was the same question, if everybody remembers, when the closing disclosure came out. Everybody wanted to know, does the lender create it? Does the settlement agent or attorney create it? It was kind of a gray area for the CD, right? They said, well, it's the lender's form, but anyone can create it. So it can vary from transaction to transaction. FinCEN is very specific in this. This is not a gray area. So according to the current RE rule, the reporting person is required to file a real estate person, is the person that conducts the actual settlement or closing, or the person who actually prepares the settlement statement. So essentially, it's not going to be the realtor. In most of these cases, there's never going to be a lender. So it falls to the title agent or settlement agent. In areas where there's split closings, that reporting person is the person who prepared the settlement statement for the purchaser. Because remember, that's who we're dealing with here, not sellers. So whoever is doing the closing or prepares the settlement statement is who is responsible for creating and submitting that report. Creating and submitting a report are 2 different things, of which we're going to dive into here in a minute. Just like many other forms that we deal with in our transactions, we have a time limit here. So this is not like a 1099 situation where you get everything signed all year, you run a report at the end of the year, and you submit all the 1099s that you're supposed to submit based on the transactions that you closed. With this real estate report, it's due the later of either 30 days after closing or the last day of the month following a closing date. So this is going to be on a monthly basis, not a yearly basis. And an example for you would be if your closing occurred on March 15th, the report is due April 30th. So it's the last day of the month following the closing date. So if it happened to close, March or April 1st, you would then report it April 30th. But if it closed March 15th, you don't fall under that 30 days. You go to the next month and you go to the last day of the month. So remember, monthly, not yearly. Different than what we deal with right now with our 1099s. So we talked a little bit about what type of properties would fall under this, who is responsible for reporting this, and when it needs to be reported. These are all key things that you guys can start thinking about. You guys can kind of think about how many of these transactions do we do that would maybe fall into this, maybe look back 3-6 months so you're prepared, meaning, oh, we've only had one or we had 50. Excuse me. And then you've got to figure out, okay, who in our office is going to be responsible for this? And we're going to go through a little checklist at the end, but I do want to point out some things that you can be thinking about now. If you happen to be using any type of automation or work list or tasks within SoftPro, you can set one up for the submissions to make sure that you don't miss that time frame for closings and when they need to be submitted. So that's something you can think about in your workflow and your process as well. Okay, so we're talking about FinCEN data collection here, meaning what information am I even getting? The information that you're going to need to get may change. I doubt it. If anything, they'll probably add something. But right now, the basic information that is needed to be collected is going to be as follows. You're going to, who is the reporting person information, so your firm or your individual information, the closing date, the property address and full legal description, the transferee buyer information, a person associated with the transferee, meaning an authorized signers, beneficial owners, transfer or seller information. If the transfer is a trust, you got to also include the trustee information, purchase price, payment information, including bank account details where the funds are coming from. Remember, these are cash deals. Detailed payment information for payments made on behalf of the transfer borrower. I want to note here again that FinCEN has not issued the final version of this report. This is the most basic information that you are going to be expected to obtain. This is not all information that is going to be in your file within SoftPro. We can obviously see that, right? Alta has come out with what we're calling a certification form. I can actually switch over here in a minute and show you it. It is not final because they're waiting on the final rule in the final form to make sure they include all the information. But at some point in planning for this, you have to think about and figure out who am I going to give that certification form to? And what I mean by certification form, it's a form for them to fill out all this information. It can be, you know, only a couple pages. It could go up to 9-10 pages, depending on how many trusts or authorized signers or beneficial owners might be involved in this. This, again, is not information that you're going to have within your file. This is outside of your file. So this is something that you're either going to have to present to the realtor to give to their buyer to fill out, or this is something that once your closing has been scheduled or they've called you to set it up, that you're going to need to send out to the various buyers to fill out. We're going to get into good information and bad information here, but this is just on the highest level to start thinking about what's going to be my process once we identify that this falls in under the new rule. How am I going to get that information? Because again, even though it's not information that you have in your file right now, you are the one that's expected to create that final form for FinCEN and submit it. I think
Hey, Leslie, we have a quick question.
Yes.
Someone asked, does this also include transactions with a hard money lender?
That's a good question. You know what? Let me go to a different screen here real quick. Let's see where I have it. Sorry. Here we go. One up. Let me go back. Okay. So here we have what the transactions that are covered. So it applies to all cash purchases of residential real estate in all territories where at least one of the buyee or transfers a legal entity is an LLC, a corp, partnership, trust, trustee, or non-natural person. So originally when this first came out, because that's a really good question, everyone said, oh, okay, cash deals, that's easy enough. But it's actually not just cash deals. So it is cash purchases where you meet the entities up there. But it's not just all cash sales. It's also transactions that involve private or seller financing, And it also includes sale transactions or line of credit involving a loan by a bank, mortgage broker, mortgage bank, or other source that is not required to have an anti-money laundering program. So most lenders do, but if this particular lender is not required to have an anti-money laundering program in place, then they would fall under this. That's a hard thing for you guys to know. So that's part of that certification of finding out what type of financing the person is getting and whether or not it falls under this. And I apologize. I think because my screen kept going more than one at a time, I skipped this entire screen, which I was just wondering about as I was walking through. So in answer to your question, this is the guidelines. That PDF that I'm going to send goes into a little bit more detail, as well as far as identifying whether or not a lender falls under that. But essentially, a lender will not fall under it unless they're not required to have an anti-money laundering program. If they have an anti-money laundering program, then they do not fall under this. Seller financing definitely falls under this. Any kind of crazy private financing that, again, wouldn't have any anti-money laundering program falls under this. And then, of course, cash. The PDF I'm going to send out to you all as well will list out the entities that are exempt. There's like 16, so I didn't want to waste all the time going over them today. Also, we don't know if that's going to be their final exemption list, but it is very straightforward, and it's something you can definitely use within your office as far as education and training and knowing what to expect and what not to expect. So hopefully that answers your question. It's not necessarily a specific type of lender. It's more a lender that isn't required to have an anti-money laundering program.
Got it. Thanks. We had one other question, and I think this is still undetermined on FinCEN's side, but someone asked, will there be an integration with SoftPro?
That is a great question, and I lied before when I said that my number one question was who gets to submit it. The number one question we get is SoftPro going to go ahead and submit this for us? And this is twofold, and Ellen is correct. The answer is, as of right now, FinCEN has not provided an API or a way to automate the systems for anybody. So we can collect the data, we can spit out a report that has any and all the required information in the program that is part of the reporting. But as of right now, FinCEN has not provided any vendor with the ability to electronically submit the information. And that is something that we've been talking to them about, and it is something that is definitely on their radar. And they are aware of the need and the burden of work that we create on the title agent or settlement agent side of having to rekey all this information in. I don't have a straight answer for you, I know that, but the answer is we have been asking for it and we are ready for it. We've done what we needed to do at our end so that when they do provide it and come out with it, we can quickly get that working, tested, and out to everybody. But as of right now, your planning and workflow process should look at this as more of a manual. There was talk of them accepting a PDF document. I have not seen where they said that's okay. I can't imagine that they would say that that's okay. I can't imagine that they would want to key in information at their end. However, that is something we're keeping our eye on as well. But as of right now, the expectation is that you will gather this information through a certification form. You will then go onto FinCEN's website and you will fill out their real estate report based on the information that was gathered. Not ideal, and hopefully very short term, or hopefully when they give the final rule, they give us access so that we can automate this as well. But to date, they don't have that capability at their end. I think that answers that, right, Ellen?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. All of these are very great questions, and I can promise you, you're going to leave this webinar with probably more questions than you came into. It's kind of a weird, I was telling Ellen earlier today, this is kind of a weird rule in my opinion, whereas it's not difficult. It doesn't affect most of your transactions. Some people may be affected by it more based on where they do business or if they do a lot of, cash deals in a particular area. But it's not like most of the rules that we deal with where it's going to impact your day-to-day, every day. However, that said, it is something that you need to prepare for, and you need to have the means in place for if and when you do have a transaction that applies to this. So I don't want to like create fear mongering and, oh my God, look at all this information and we have to do this and we have to do that. It really just comes down to transactions that fall under those requirements. And that is not going to be your standard, buy, sell, residential refinance type situation. So keep that in mind, but also keep in mind, it doesn't mean you can just push this to the back burner. You do need to kind of have something in place, or at least have one or two people in your organization that fully know what to look for and how to handle it. It is pretty straightforward. I will say that there's very few gray areas. And we are going to talk about, like, as far as liability of information and what to do with the information you get. And we'll go into that here shortly. But to date, we don't have a way to automate it. Hopefully we will shortly. If you do hear of companies saying that they can automate it, I can promise you what they mean is they can pull the data from your file, and you don't need to like create a report on your own, but they're only able to pull information that's in the systems already. So, we don't have all that information and a way to store a lot of it as of yet. But once we get that information from FinCEN, then we can remedy that.
And Leslie,
Anything
someone
else?
asked a clarifying
Yeah.
question. And they said, so there will be a built-in report at some point we can run, and it sounds like it's maybe to be determined at this point.
Yes, we're going to use SoftPro 360 to pull the data that exists in the file. And then for data that's not in the file, my guess from conversations, and again, this is speculatory, but probably likely, anything that doesn't already exist in there, just like anything else with 360, it'll prompt you for information that you would be able to type in. And then once it's automated with FinCEN, it would just flow through. Right now, we could pull a report that, has basic information, but it wouldn't have all the information that's listed here on the screen yet, because we don't have all of the trustees' information, payment information, sources of funds. So does that mean we're not going to put that report in before the automation? No, we probably will for sure. Maybe create it through prompts or however it is they're working on it. And I could find that out and where they are with that, and obviously include that in the follow-up email. But I know all the conversations we've had, the end goal is automation, and the interim goal is to create some sort of report that'll show you everything that is in the file or that we prompt you for, so that you have that, and you're not having to manually gather that information.
All right, thanks.
Okay, anything else?
Not right now.
Okay, great. Okay, so this expected required information may or may not change. If anything, I would expect they would add to it. I don't think they're going to take any of this away. I mentioned that ALTA has come out with a certification form. And just to clarify once again, that this is an ALTA form. It's not required. It was meant to be like an aid, if you will. I don't want anyone to, literally lose their minds when they first see it, because it is 9 pages. It is 9 pages of information that may or may not need to be collected. So they basically thought through every scenario, like what if there's 9 trustees? What if there's multiple, benefit of ownership people? So it's very detailed and very intense, but it's not necessarily 9 pages of information that's going to be filled out each and every one of these type of transactions. So I wouldn't like hone in on that. I would just use it as a guideline of information that needs to be collected. And you can certainly utilize it. You can certainly create your own. We have something in there as well. I mean, to be fair, we probably just use Alta's. But when you see it, I don't want you to think, oh my God, she downplayed how much information I need to pick. There's 9 pages in here. Again, there might just be one trustee, and that's literally 5 pages that you don't need past that. So it'll be there. It'll be a lot. It'll be useful, but it's not necessarily going to be the same for each transaction. I believe you can take a look at that on their website, but I did get permission to include it in our follow-up to share it with you guys. Just please know it's not finalized. It's still redlined because we're waiting on that final rule. They want to make sure they have all the information, but we will include that along with FinCEN's FAQs in our follow-up email for everybody. Okay, so I'm talking about gathering this information, and we live in a pretty accountable, you guys are held accountable for a lot of the work you do. You are also liable sometimes for a lot of the information. So part of FinCEN, they did actually include what they call reasonable reliance. So I pulled some of the information straight from there, as you can see, but just to kind of high level explain it, it's the reporting person may reasonably rely on information collected from others under the conditions described in paragraph J. Paragraph J says reasonable reliance. Except as described in another paragraph of this section, the reporting person may rely upon information provided by other persons, absent of knowledge of facts that would reasonably call into question the reliability of the information provided from the reporting person. Essentially, what they're saying is when you provide that certification form, let's just use Alta's as an example. When you're trying to gather information, you are not expected to know for fact if it's correct or not. Because you could give that to the realtor could give that to their buyer. That buyer, whether it be a trust, a state, a corporation, or whatever it is, could fill it out. And that information could either be correct or it could be deceitful, correct? So you would not know that. If they're filling out the information and it looks reasonable, then you're basically covered. You kind of got a CYA on reasonable reliance. You did your due diligence, you got the certification form, you gave it to the correct parties, they filled it out, you got it back, and if it looks reasonable, there's no real reason why you would have to question that. So you are covered under that. And it even goes further down here, excuse me, and says certification when reporting beneficial ownership information. For purposes of reporting, paragraphs above, of course, the reporting person may rely upon information provided by the transferee or a person representing them in the reportable transfer, again, absent of knowledge of facts, reasonably questioned, blah, 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 that if the person providing the information certifies the accuracy of the information in writing to the best of that person's knowledge, that's all that they can ask of you. You do not need to dig around. You do not need to, bring in people to certify things. It's called reasonable reliance. Now, that said, they do say use your brain. If it makes sense, great. If not, ask questions. If it doesn't make sense, don't rely on the certification, which to me brings up the only gray area in this FinCEN ruling. My question to them, and I'm waiting for an answer, is if you get a certification back and for whatever reason you have a red flag and you can't get them to clear up that red flag, are you supposed to still close that transaction? Or are you supposed to get them to sign something saying, I don't like this, I don't think this is correct, sign it saying you say it's correct and then close? Or is it enough to just rely on reasonable reliance and say, we gave it to them, they filled it out, I did the closing, I'm reporting it? That seems to be the take of FinCEN right at this point. And I feel like that's probably what they're going to put in the final rule. But just kind of, use your brain. If something looks off and you don't feel comfortable with it, you're allowed to question it. You're allowed to go back to that realtor or to that buyer, whoever is acting on behalf of the buyer, and ask questions. I don't know that it means you don't have to do the closing. We're waiting for clarification on that. But you also have a say in what you feel comfortable doing and not doing. So we just want to point that out, that 99% of the time you are literally handing out this certification form or gathering the information and then you are filling it out. But if by chance you see a bunch of red flags and you're not comfortable, you are well within your means to say, to question it, or to say, we're not comfortable doing this closing and reporting this information. You've got to find someone else to do it. More to come on that. That's pretty much one of the only gray areas that I've come up with so far going through this. And I know that that was part of the public comment that went back to them. So I would expect them to provide further clarification and guidance when that final rule comes out shortly. Any questions, Ellen?
We do have a couple. I'm not sure, they may go hand in hand. We had one question saying previously, if there was the 25% plus cutoff to ownership or trustee ownership, will this still be applicable? And someone else asked, the previous orders had a minimum price for the transaction. Has this been removed? So it would be all applicable transactions regardless of the purchase price.
Yes, it is all applicable transactions. The threshold has been removed. And then as far as the first one with the benefit of ownership, They did make some, they did put out a ruling and made some changes to that, but it didn't affect our end. The information that I'm going to send you does break down that percentage of ownership and clarifies exactly what you're asking. So once we send that to you and you get or have a chance to look at it, if you have any further questions, just let me know and we'll get FinCEN's answer for you. Anything else?
That's it for now.
Okay. All right. I'm certain my screen is about to go to the next screen, so bear with me here. One thing that they did include is record retention, record keeping requirements. So it's pretty straightforward. You are going to be responsible for maintaining these records because you are the one that has created and submitted it. So the basic breakdown is 5 years from filing of report, not from closing, but from filing of report. So that 30 days or the end, the end of the next month. You must maintain reports and designated agreements, certifications, and copies of records for beneficial ownership reporting. So everything tied to it that you reported needs to be maintained for those 5 years. So what does that mean for you now? Because we don't have that final rule. They don't have a lot of specs around how you'll maintain it, but just some things that maybe you can think about now is talking with your IT person about increased cost of storage, if there will be any. Again, you may not do a lot of these type of transactions. I can't reiterate that enough. You may do a ton of them, so only you know what type of transactions that you do a lot of. So it might not really have a huge, your IT person might be like, no problem to store all that. We don't do enough of those type of transactions. How are you going to safely collect and store the information? Determine access to stored information, meaning can anybody access it or how's you going to access it? And then just develop that plan for safe destruction after those 5 years, just like you would any other documentation like ROM documents or anything like that, that you have a timeline that you have to keep on them. Usually they're pretty specific of how they have to be destroyed as well. So again, some of that is going to come with the final rule, but just some things that you might want to think about now. Okay, so keeping in line with things that you can think about now, and again, this is going to have a different impact on different organizations. So how to identify transactions covered by the rule? Like, what's your process going to be? And also identify previous transactions to see how many applied, understanding exemptions. So those all kind of go hand in hand. So let's talk about that. So that second part there says identify previous transactions to see how many applied. I think before you put forth this massive effort as far as preparing workflow, tasks, education, training, who's going to do what, I think it would behoove you to look back 3 months, 6 months, even a year and say, how many transactions did we do in this previous time frame that would have fallen under this new rule? I think that's going to give you a fairly good gauge of how many transactions you can expect moving forward to also fall under that, right? So if you look back and it's a decent enough amount, then your planning might look different than say mine, that I only did 2 in the last 12 months. I still need to know about it and have a plan in place, but I don't really need to, get all hands on deck. Anytime something, I can pick 1 or 2 people to handle the few that ever come in. If it is more than that and you want to, be prepared and you don't want to specifically identify individuals to do it, everyone needs to know how, then you can kind of plan accordingly. I have understanding exemptions in here. Again, remember, I'm going to send you a chart that specifically says what is exempt and what isn't, what type of property is exempt, what isn't, what type of entity is exempt and what isn't. So that should be pretty easy to train people on. Identifying the transactions covered by the rule, I think if it's cash or seller financing or like an unusual private financing, that's pretty straightforward to me. But a lender that isn't required to have the anti-money laundering system requirements in place in their bank is going to be the tricky one. So I don't know what your process would be for that. I'm sure Alto and your underwriters will come out with some sort of questionnaire that would help identify that at the get-go. But it's just kind of some stuff that you need to kind of think through of, okay, how do we identify this transaction? And then also, again, like I said, kind of planning how many have we done, and then also what is exempt. The exemptions are pretty easy. Like I said, the what we're going to send you is like a PDF. I mean, literally look on this chart and see if it does it meet any of these. They're exempt. If not, they're not exempt. Something else to think about is where in your workflow you want to gather the information. By information, I mean that certification form that's going to house all the information that you have to then use report to FinCEN. Like I just mentioned, Alta created this one. It's 9 pages. Again, it's not going to be filled out to 9 pages all the time. It just depends on how many entities are involved. But is this something that as soon as you identify that this transaction is covered by the rule, you want to go ahead and send a copy of that to the realtor? Or if there's no realtor, you want to send it to the buyer, or whatever your process may be. Again, remember, if you're using, tasks, or if you're using checklist items, or if you're using any type of automation, you can figure out how to incorporate this as well. So once you identify when you want to go ahead and start gathering that information, I would venture to say sooner than later. It's not something you're going to want to try and get at the closing table, mostly because a lot of that information the people at the closing table may not know. They would need to gather it from the different entities involved. The next thing to think about is how will you collect that information? Will you just send them that form? Will you try and make it a fillable PDF? Whatever your process is, you just want to kind of make sure that you have a way to get the information out to whoever needs to get it, and then how you'll receive it. I talked about this with the pushback of, what if the information is not correct? But also another thing to think about is what if you get customer pushback, meaning a borrower or buyer just says, I don't want to give you all that information, or I'm not going to fill this out, or I'm not going to do that. What's your process at that point? Do you say, okay, well, we're legally required to gather this information and send it into FinCEN? If you're not going to provide it, then we're not going to close. Or are you coming up with some sort of indemnity form that says, we have asked, this is the limited information they gave us, they've signed it, and now we're going to close and report what we have. So it's just kind of something to think about as far as what, in worst case scenario, how you would handle that. Who is filing and how, meaning who within your organization is going to be responsible for filing those reports on a monthly basis. Like I just mentioned and we talked about, currently there's no way to automate that into FinCEN. We can create reports, we can use the Alta certification, there's all sorts of stuff like that, but there's no way to click a button through SoftPro 360 and magically get that information into FinCEN as of now. Again, when that final rule comes out, maybe they're going to offer some other scenarios. We lobbied very, very hard on behalf of our industry over the past year, trying to explain to them the additional cost and time and staff and resources this might cause for people to sit there and have to rekey all this information in. So our hope is that they either come back with the automated option and we can quickly take care of that, or maybe they will accept that certification document from Alta in a PDF form. Until then, I don't know. As of right now, the only way we know about using it is simply using rekeying the information on FinCEN's website. So you definitely want to figure out, even if we get it automated or they take the PDFs, who's doing it and how, what's the process? And again, remember, you can use automation, checklist items, and work lists for some of this as well. And then lastly, we just talked about record retention. So you're going to want to think about how you're going to store these files, where you're going to store these files, who is responsible for that, and what the process would be to access them if necessary. So just kind of a little checklist of things that you can kind of start figuring out now, so that when that final rule comes out and we have that little bit of misinformation that we need, you're kind of ahead of the game and you've got stuff in place on how you want to move forward. All right, so I just talked about this. Are there any exemptions? Yes, too many to list here. I'm sure it's hard enough to sit here and listen to me talk about this riveting information for the past 40 plus minutes. So we decided that we would just have this handout that we would send you so that you can then look through it, and then it's extremely straightforward too, which is nice. Final form is coming out soon. I've said that about 100 times. Final form, to be quite honest, simply is just the information that's required. It's not a form that you're going to fill out essentially at closing. It's one that they need on their website that you would go in and fill in the data. And then just to reiterate, also create a certification form to use with your transaction partners. It is completely up to you as to whether or not you want to use this form. You can absolutely create your own, whatever you want, or you can have us create one. I'm pretty sure we'll have the Alta one in our program already, so you'll be able to electronically at least send that out. But essentially, they created it. It is very intense and thorough, which is great. You won't need all of it all the time by any means, but just know that it's there. And as mentioned previously earlier, I did get permission to send that working copy out today with the follow-up email so that you guys can at least see it and decide whether it's something you can use internally or not. And then, Ellen, I will also just confirm today that whether or not we will or will not have that in the program, and we can include that in our follow-up email as well.
Perfect.
And then with that, honestly, I mean, like, I hate to end on stay tuned, but when we don't have final rules or final forms, we generally have to speculate quite a bit and go work off of what we've had. Once we have this final ruling, we will definitely send an alert out. We will definitely do a blog piece about it. It'll be probably in our newsletters and sent out to all of our customers. I can promise you, you will absolutely be hearing from your underwriters on how they want this handled as well, per usual. So as much information as we are going to provide you, you will definitely get information from your underwriters. You'll also get information from Alta for all of you Alta members out there, and likely your state associations as well. So obviously a lot of information in a shorter period of time. Ellen, is there any questions that we didn't get to that I can try and answer?
We got a couple about fields in SoftPro, which I don't know the answer to, so I don't know if you would know or if we may need to get back on these, but there was one question about if we've considered adding a checkbox to lender contacts, meaning that lender is a hard money lender, and or adding a checkbox that could be marked that's basically FinCEN reporting required that specific user groups could be able to mark on each order.
Yeah, I actually don't know the answer to that. I know that at one point when we were having conversations with FinCEN and internally trying to figure out the easiest way for our customers to handle this, there was all sorts of talk as to stuff like this. I mean, for those of you that kind of following along, if it'd be very similar to where right now you have an option of creating a CDF or a HUD order, right? It changes fields or it makes certain fields required. That may be something that we're looking at doing. I think maybe Jamie asked this question, right? Jamie, I don't know for sure, and I don't want to say yes or no based on I don't know what the final outcome was, but as absolutely something that we can look into. We can talk to R&D and see what their plan is and where they're at with it for sure and get back with you. I know that we have been working on this nonstop as far as every time FinCEN has given us information to work with so that we can be prepared and handle it in the most easiest way possible for you guys. So if there's a way to make it easier, we for sure will. And then, like I said, we will handle it through 360 as far as the moving of the data. But Ellen, yeah, that we'll definitely have to check on. I'm not exactly sure where they landed on that, and I haven't seen any of the updated versions yet.
Yep. Okay, and then we had one other question about if we know anything about the FinCEN website as far as creating an account for each organization and if multiple users are allowed.
You know, I honestly don't. I personally have never had to log into the actual FinCEN website to submit any information. I would imagine that is easily found in the FAQ on FinCEN's website. Or quite honestly, just go on there and type that. I don't know that they are real restrictive about it. I honestly don't know the answer to that. We can certainly look into it, Jamie, and see what we can find out, because that's a good question. But I don't know as far as how many users can be within one organization or if it's just for an organization. I don't have that information yet. And partially is because I don't know that FinCEN has that worked through it in their head yet either, but we can certainly look into it.
Okay, that was it.
Okay, so again, I know it's not like the best webinar here. We like to do fun stuff too. I don't know how I got stuck with the non-fun one. But you know, again, really think through how this will impact you, how many types of these transactions. The follow-up resources that we're gonna send you, I think will really help you clarify whether this is going to have a large impact on you or a small impact on you. Big or small, you definitely need to have everything in place. But again, we will include that FAQ. We can include a link to the FinCEN, website where all this stuff is stored as well. And then we can also include the Alta's working version of their certification form as far as collecting the information to get from the buyer as well. So above and beyond that, I don't know at this point much more that we can do other than stay in touch with FinCEN and wait for the final ruling to come out, and then wait for their response as far as how they're going to require it to be submitted. And once we have that, we will relay that information to all of you as well. All right, well, like I said, it's not a full hour, so hopefully you guys can digest all this and maybe grab a coffee in the last 10 minutes that you get back here. If anybody thinks of any follow-up questions or needs anything, please feel free to email me directly. I'm happy to answer or find out an answer or put you in touch with someone who may have an answer. You please utilize this as a resource. You can definitely utilize your underwriter as a resource as well. But until we have more, we'll just kind of answer questions that come in and then update everybody as we get information. So we will end this and send out our follow-up email as soon as we get everything together for you guys. And we will look forward to seeing you hopefully on our next Saved You a Seat webinar. And in the meantime, enjoy your week, enjoy hopefully some more warmer weather. And again, feel free to reach out if you need anything at all. Thanks for joining.